Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar, Tidy Up, Does Your Data Spark Joy? My name is Chad and I'll be your host today. I'm also joined by our presenter, of course, Sharon Hawkins, and our panelist, Dino Trewick, also Jamie Nash, James Holly, and Sunny Farmahan. If at any time during today's webinar you have a question, feel free to use the Q&A option located at the bottom of your Zoom control screen. You can enter those questions at any time, and we will attempt to answer all of the questions at the end of today's presentation. Also, if you'd like to actually join the conversation, feel free to use that raise your hand option or the chat function to message any of the panelists or the presenters as well. So it is my pleasure to introduce Sharon Hawkins, the GIS and Mapping Administrator with ArDOT, to present Tidy Up, Does Your Data Spark Joy? Sharon, we'll turn things over to you.
Thank you, Chad. I appreciate it. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for all the panelists for joining me on here today as panelists. And thank you to the audience out there that's watching. I was hoping to tune in, or that I can entice everybody to tune in across the Arkansas GIS community with the catchy title that I totally stole from the Marie Kondo craze that was, I don't know, maybe about 3 years ago now. Because let's face it, it's not always the most exciting thing to talk about data, but it sure is essential. Chad, can you verify that you can see my screen for me?
Yeah, you are good to go, Sharon.
Thank you. So again, talking about data isn't always exciting, but it sure is essential. Today, we won't be talking about any kind of specific data set, but rather a topic that I think a lot of us are familiar with, or at least a phrase that we've all heard, in the past couple of years, which is data governance, right? So there's slightly varying definitions across the board on data governance. This is one that I kind of tune to and have in my head about data governance. One of my favorites, I guess. So data governance is the process and procedure organizations use to manage, utilize, and protect their data. But before I go any further, I want to add a disclaimer that this presentation is not going to teach you how to achieve data governance at your agency. Not going to actually reveal the actual process to do, but I thought it would be a great common conversation to have across the Arkansas GIS community. I think we're going to all be able to identify with many things that are said in this presentation. So let's talk a little bit about how, when you know you need data governance, okay? So first thing is identifying challenges that you're having with your data. So on this slide here, you can see that some of the challenges that we've identified in the past here at ArDOT are data standards. So data standards could be, how you collect data, what's the accuracy of your data, what does your database schema look like, duplication of effort. So is there a bunch of copies of your data hanging out there, and nobody's actually using maybe the authoritative source, but a static copy of that data, which is always dangerous. Lack of data documentation. So who loves to write metadata, right? Nobody. It's an essential part of this, and we are lacking, certainly here at the agency, for data documentation. Data accessibility. Does everybody know how to get to your data? And then maybe this comes all the way back to duplication of effort. Maybe that's why people are making multiple copies of the data, because they're not exactly sure how to connect to it. Or does that data move around a little bit? And then communication about your data. Are you talking about your data? Are you advertising your data? Does people know your data exists? And do they know how to use your data? So again, just some of the challenges that we've talked about here at the department. And then here's another challenge that I think a lot of you will be able to identify with too: data silos, right? So here at the department, it's a big agency. We have a lot of offices that have GIS pockets within them. So for instance, I'm in the planning division, but we have a environmental division, we have a maintenance division, we have a system information and research division, a program management division, etc. All of those divisions have some GIS pockets within them, hence separate silos of data that's out there. And then we also have the issue that sometimes there's just too many cooks in the kitchen when it comes to data. So I mentioned all those silos that we have around here. So all those silos have people that are in charge of that data. So they are the leaders. But can all of us be leaders when it comes to data? Or do we need to have a way for everybody to come together to figure out exactly how to manage our data in a more governed way? And then the last challenge identified here is the fact that this happens a lot. We have this conversation a lot. We go over these challenges. We've been over them for years now. And we set ourselves on fire. We're like, yes, let's do something about this. It sounds easy that we're going to be able to solve the problem. But before too long, we kind of fizzle out a little bit. So the department a couple of years ago decided to try something new. So we hired a company called Cambridge Systematics to come in and develop a data business plan for the department. So this was pretty much a company coming in to look at us from the outside. So from the outside looking in. And in the beginning, it was a little offensive, right? Because we were like, why do we want to pay somebody to tell us what we already know is wrong? But as I go through this, I think you guys will see that we saw some surprising results from what they observed from us. So their goal was to kind of build a roadmap for data governance here at the department. So first goal was assess the current state of the data here at the department. Second goal was to examine, create, and come up with ways to revise policies and documentation about your data. Third was, how are you going to advertise and train your data users? Not just the users that are at the department, but future users as well. And then final goal is to implement data governance at an enterprise level at the department. So let's look at assessing the current state of the data. So what better way to do that than a survey, right? So Cambridge worked with data owners at the department to develop a survey, and we encourage participants from across the department. And you guys can see from the slide, there was about 233 completed responses received from across the department. And this is showing you all the different divisions and or areas that those responses came from. And we also tried to ensure in the survey that most of the data at the department would be represented within the survey. So here we go. All right, so I'm not going to go over all the questions in the survey, but certainly some to highlight those surprises that we were looking at. So one of the questions was asked is, what is your role with data and databases across the department? And for the most part, you guys can see that 56%, over half of the respondents of the survey said that they were users of the data. Something important to know. And then who collects the data? So it looks like most of the data here at the department collected internally. And then why is the data collected? Of course, it probably wouldn't collect data if you didn't have to, right? So meet federal mandates, meet state requirements. Certainly data is, for the most part, collected because it has to be collected. So let's look at some of the red flags from our survey results that we got. So confidence in data quality. All right, here's a red flag. 39% of the respondents said that they were somewhat confident in data quality. I think everybody should be extremely confident in that data quality. So certainly a red flag, something for us to pay attention to and look at. Why were respondents only somewhat confident in data here at the department? Data documentation. 72% said that they weren't sure if documentation existed about data that they were using. Another red flag, which means that they don't have anything to refer to let them know about the data, why the data was created, and most importantly, how to use the data. So maybe the documentation existed. Maybe 72% of the people didn't know where to get that documentation. That's still a problem. All right, so where is the data stored? Let's look at our red flags here. 8% said on individual computers. No, no, no. 29% said not sure. Oh my goodness. Who is the data shared with? 32% not sure, I don't know. So as a data owner, if you're marking not sure, I don't know who my data is shared with, that means you don't have a good grasp on who's utilizing your data, and maybe any kind of statistics or analysis that you need to do to understand how those users use your data, and or maybe they need your data to be a little bit different to be the most useful it could be. And then challenges in analyzing data. So, we're GIS, we are location-based right here. So 12% lack of geographical information in data. We weren't able to map data that was out there. Different data formats, 24%, absolutely. I mean, Access, Excel, SQL, whatever you could get your hands on, data was in those different formats across the department. And then structure for managing data. So an overwhelming or 70% of the respondents indicated that a formal structure for managing data just wasn't available here at the department. All right, so data governance. So less than a quarter of the respondents said that there is no data governance over their data here at the department. And then also needs. So asking those respondents, what are your needs when it does come to data? So some excellent information really coming out of this survey. Things that we didn't know before this step happened. And then with the survey, we did have a part, this was an anonymous survey, by the way, so we don't know who answered what. And we also said, please type out your responses, your frustrations, your wins, your goals for data across the department. And since it was anonymous, we got some pretty good, honest answers. So access or permission to use the data can be an issue, somebody said. Somebody else said, it would be better if you could find all the information in one location. It's not user-friendly. And then finally, somebody said, I use a lot of the databases around the department. Many are hard to access and even harder to find. Most of the responses were negative in nature from the survey. But again, something that as data owners and creators across the department, we needed to know. And then here was our favorite typed out response. Again, an anonymous survey gives you some honest answers. So this person said, I just wish the Cardinals were playing better baseball this year. Amen, right? So one of the things that came out of the survey is kind of this data flow map, right? So as an agency, really valuable to have this information, this visual graphic, to show not just data owners and creators and users, but our administration to say, look how data is created and used across the department. Look how every division is relying upon every other division to provide information to them. Look how important data is here. Moreover, look how important it is that we have a governed structure for our data. And then we also had I guess, kind of a maturity assessment that went along with this survey. So after all the responses, Cambridge kind of gave us let us tell you how mature you are in certain areas. So data collection and technical standards. Okay, so the white circles that you're seeing on your screen, those are indicating where we are right now at our maturity level. Okay, so 1 is the least mature, 5 is the most mature. Okay, so as you guys kind of look at the screen, you can see that we are moderately mature for the most part. Certainly a lot of 2s that we wish weren't 2s on there. But we do have some wins. You know, we are getting up in the 4 and the 5s on some of these, on some that we want to be in. And each year we kind of go back and we look at this chart and we see if we've matured any, maybe not so much yet, but we're going to get there. All right, so let's go to the second stop on the roadmap, which is examine, create, and revise policies and documentation. All right, so let's go back to how we all love to write metadata, right? So policies and documentation. So I'm talking about 2 different things here. So data dictionaries and data catalogs. Okay, so your data catalog is going to be, you know, a list that says what data is available and where does that data live, and clarifying kind of the owners. So bridge inventory is from the you know, bridge folks down in maintenance division. Arnold is from the planning division, so people know. Data dictionary is kind of going to be a list of attributes on that data, which each attribute means. I think most of you are familiar with that. You know, kind of limitations on how that data can be used or how that data can be published. But really, it's all metadata. Here's my favorite quote about metadata. Metadata is a love note to the future, right? You can't say it any better than that. It's when you guys have to have a new project and you're having to dig in. Isn't it nice if you have some information about what you're supposed to do or data that already exists, right? And when you don't, it's terribly frustrating. But when you find something that unlocks some answers about that data, it's pretty incredible. So maybe if we think about leaving love notes to the future, it can kind of change our mind. Because I'm going to assume that a lot of you are like us, and a lot of our metadata kind of looks like this. So we got some hard copies, and maybe it's not shelved very well. And a lot of our metadata is in our head, right? But that's not going to last forever. So think about those love notes to the future. All right, so let's go to our third stop on our road to advertise and train data users. So I can certainly relate to this. So I've been here at the department for a number of years now, over 20 years. So of course I think I know everything, right? And I am not putting myself in the position of somebody that's only been here for, say, 6 months. Am I thinking that they know what I know? Because if I am, I shouldn't. We should take the time to consider new employees coming in, or employees that have been here and that have changed jobs, and they are not familiar with what you know. So how do we train those users? How do we make sure that we keep them in mind? So, you know, lots of ideas out there, but the big question is, are we effective communicators when it comes to data? And just based on those survey responses, I think it was an overwhelming no, we weren't good communicators. We certainly need to learn how to do that. So again, as I was saying, you know, we're looking at new users or folks that have been here for a long time, even public users. I'm sure some of you out there have used the Department of Transportation data, which we thank you very much for. Did you know how to use it? Did you understand the data that you were looking at? And were you able to reach out to somebody to ask them about it? So things that we need to think about as we move along. But as a unified group, how should we be advertising and looking at our data? We do have some small wins on training. So we offer something here in the planning division called the House of Pain. It's kind of a beginner's guide to GIS and spatial data at ArDOT. We've had a few renditions of this over the years, but it offers exercises, shows new users how to connect to the data, gives them exercises on how to use the data, how to get to information on different parts of the network. But it does take work, and it does have to be updated. And you do need to make those employees use it and go through it and do it. All right, so we're going to go to our last stop on our roadway here towards data governance. So implementing data governance at an enterprise or department level. So what Cambridge did is they came in and they said, okay, after we've looked at everything from the survey and we've talked to all the groups, this is what this model that I'm showing here on the screen, this is what we've decided is going to fit best for your agency. So at the top here, we have our top administration. So our director, our chief operating officer, and all of our assistant chief engineers and our division heads up here. Then there's a data governance liaison. So a single person that kind of is a go-between between our last group down here, which is all of our working groups. So that could be our different divisions that I talked about in the beginning of the presentation. So everybody that deals with data across the department. So this person in the middle would be the go-between. So maybe the folks down here at the bottom are talking about their concerns or their need for different kinds of software, or these are the official department rules that we would like to instate about data. And this liaison would talk to that top administration and try to get those answers and standards in place. So right now, so far here at the department, this has not been implemented. We are actually in the midst of more of a bottom-up approach. So data owners and collectors, we're all talking to each other. Again, we all know the challenges across the department. So why can't we come together and start this ourselves? So, you know, this is to intimidate, right? To say, this is all you have to do. This is all you have to do to implement data governance. But really, the journeys begin with those small steps. So I think making everybody aware of what our challenges are with data and doing these small steps to move forward could be our way in for implemented data governance across the state. But with those small steps, I don't want to discount data here at the department. So we've had some giant leaps too. And I know that I haven't listed out everything that I should, but all of these data elements that you're seeing on the screen over here, those are implemented, wonderful data sets that have been going on for years, you know, collected, they're documented, they have, you know, they have policies and procedures in place on how this should be done. So we have great data, but we don't want to go backwards, right? I mean, people are going to retire, right? We want to make sure that those love notes are written and made, and as new people come in, this data stays just as wonderful as it is now. All right, and that's all I have today. Certainly want to open it up for any kind of questions or comments that you guys have. I would love to hear if somebody's going through the same thing. right? Just give me a shout out at the end. That would be great. I know you are. Anyway, I appreciate everybody listening today. Thank you. Chad, I'm going to hand it back to you.
All right. Thank you, Sharon. So we will open things up for the live Q&A. If anyone has any questions at this time, please feel free to enter them into your Q&A option or use the chat function, or even raise your hand if you'd like to just join the conversation. We'd be happy to address any of those questions you may have.
Hey, Sharon, thanks so much for sharing your expertise and your experience at ArDOT. I'm curious, and you may have mentioned this, forgive me if you did, but I'm kind of curious these days, how many folks are interacting with a GIS software as you would define it? Is it hard to say, or do you have a number?
Right. I guess it's kind of hard to say. So I'm going to say with desktop GIS software here at the department, we're looking at close to 30 desktop users. Okay. But let's talk about ArcGIS Online. Hundreds, which is great. I mean, that's great news. That's great news. But they're using data that's published out through our servers, and that data is still important to make sure that we have standards on it, and keep the communication going out there and keep that data fresh. Sometimes, I'm sure you guys have experienced this, somebody will publish a data layer and then it's not touched for 5 years and people are still using it. That's dangerous.
Well, yeah, kudos, man. You got the iDrive Arkansas is a fave, and I hear good things about it all the time. And anytime someone mentions it, I was like, yeah, I know some of those folks that are putting that together. They're awesome.
Right. I can say that iDrive Arkansas every morning it is refreshed with the latest and greatest data. So
yeah, well, it's a great app. Thank you.
Sharon, I had a question on the buy-in for the department. How easy was it after this survey was done by Cambridge that all the departments jumped in, or has there been some pushback or lagging on getting some of that implemented?
So Dina, that's a great question, and really we've only had 2 opportunities to share out the results from this study to the department, and not a lot of opportunity for implementation. I think everybody's absolutely willing to buy into this, but a lot of folks are waiting for that leadership role to come in to say, let's do it. That's why this kind of bottom up approach that we're trying right now. We're hoping that'll get some momentum. This was done in 2018. What I'm talking about here. Now we're still talking about it, but it just hasn't gotten a lot of momentum yet.
All right. So looks like a couple of questions. Well, maybe one comment and one question. Looks like Jake says, shout out from ArDOT. We are going through the exact same thing that you just talked about. So kudos. Question from Michael. Do you think something as simple as creating a database inventory on a shared spreadsheet would be a benefit to the department? Do we already have something like that in place?
All right, so hi, Michael. Michael works just right down the hall in a different division. Michael is a newer employee to the division that he is in, and that's a great question, and it's also a great example of communication around here. So Michael, that'd be a great idea, kind of like a data tree and who owns it, something even as simple as a spreadsheet right now would be a great start, specifically for data that's in your separate division, so that can be shared out. Any start is a good start. And Michael, I know that doesn't exist yet for SIR division, at least I don't think it does. So I think that's a great idea. And maybe after this phone call, we can get together and talk in person about that.
All right, very good, Michael. All right, so looks like if there's any other questions, you guys feel free to enter those now. And like I mentioned, I've just wanted to try this feature out for some time, and no one's raised their hand. But if someone wants to raise their hand and join the conversation, we can use this really awesome feature to do so. If you've got something you'd like to talk about or share, now is your opportunity. So if that does conclude all of the questions and comments, I would like to, of course, remind everyone to check their emails and watch out for the announcement for our webinar next month on August 18th. We'll have another presentation or installment to the Arkansas GIS Users Forum educational webinar series. And of course, another reminder to visit events.argisusers.org to visit and learn more about the 2021 Arkansas GIS Symposium and Training coming up in just 55 days. So if you are interested and you would like to attend, the platform is there, as well as a link to submit and share your presentation. If you'd like to be a part of this upcoming symposium, we would gladly welcome your interaction. I would like to, of course, thank Sharon for your presentation today and all of your information, as well as our panelists, and most of all of our attendees for joining us today. On behalf of the Arkansas GIS User Forum, thank you all for attending.